Welcome back to Free Founders, where we share actionable lessons from the world's best solopreneurs and small business owners. This is for aspiring entrepreneurs who want proven strategies to go from zero to first sale and onwards to scale and enjoy the freedom that comes along with it. My guest today is Tanja Lau, a 3-time founder and now founder of Product Academy. Tanya believes it's always the right time to launch a business if you're feeling called to do so, even when you have a baby at home. In this episode, expect to learn why becoming a parent was the motivation Tanya needed to become a solopreneur, the systems and beliefs that help her be both successful as an entrepreneur and as a parent of young kids, and thirdly, why she fainted at her own wedding. I'm very curious to hear that last one, particularly. Tanya, welcome to the show. Let's start with that story. You fainted at your own wedding. Tell me about that.
In 2017, 1-year-old, my daughter Maya, and I was had a product role at a joint venture, big ambition in Switzerland. I was leading a team of 16 people at that time, and I was commuting back and forth between Bern and Zurich, which is like a 1-hour commute in Switzerland. And the most important information, I think, is that my daughter hardly ever slept. Like, she would sleep for about like 40 minutes at night, and then she would wake up and breastfeed. And so I didn't get a lot of sleep at that time. And I think that, in combination with a very challenging job, commuting, and especially the fact that I had to establish product as a department in this company that had never heard of what product even was as a function, took its toll on me. And so it's true that at my wedding, like, I managed to get through the ceremony, but before dinner, I fainted while breastfeeding my kid, because I was so exhausted and I didn't want to see it, actually. And I think a lot of people around me didn't notice it so much, because I just kept on doing my things and delivering my results, but I had lost a ton of weight. And actually, I remember going to the tailor, like, to fit my wedding dress, and every time it wouldn't fit, and I was like, why is it so hard to make it fit? But I didn't realize that every time I had lost more and more weight. And so I think it was only natural that it happened at some point in time. And in hindsight, I'm really happy that it happened at the wedding, because there's no way you can sugarcoat that afterwards, right? If you faint and suddenly, I mean, it took people a while to realize that I wasn't there, because there were actually 2 floors, and so everybody thought I was in the other part of the wedding.
I think you probably panicked and ran.
At some point in time, my husband realized I wasn't there, and so I actually spent my wedding night on a friend's couch. So technically, I still owe my husband a wedding night, but it was a good moment to then really stop and figure out, like, what led me here to this moment where apparently a lot of things have gone wrong, and where do I want to go from here, because it was so clear I can't continue like this. And so after that, we went on our honeymoon and had some time to, like, disconnect and talk about everything. Not a ton of time, because we still had this 1-year-old kid that we needed to take care of. And I think what I would have loved to get is, like, a lot of time to myself to think and process, but you still are a parent at that point in time. Are you still taking care of the family and figuring things out? But I got to a point where I realized that I didn't want to stay in that company, and I made the decision to quit, which still took like 4 months to to really for me to really leave the company due to my contract. But I took the decision quite early that I wanted to quit, and I didn't know what I wanted to do next, and that stressed me out quite a bit, because I feel like we're not particularly good as humans when it comes to the art of melting down and just letting this process happen and just be in the unknown. We always want to know, like, what's next. It's okay to have a burnout or to have a meltdown, as long as you know what you're going to do to fix it. But apart from quitting my job, I didn't have a plan yet at that point in time. I just knew I wanted to do something with product. I wanted to do something challenging and entrepreneurial. And I wanted to work part-time. That was something that I figured out, like I can no longer work like 80% on paper, which turned out to be like way more than 100% in reality, right? I wanted to work way less. And then I started looking for 40% jobs, leadership roles, and there aren't that many. At least it's not in Switzerland. I think in many other European countries, that's also not something that you'll come across very often. So at some point, I realized like there is no job out there that I can apply for if those are the things that I want. And so it took me a couple of months to realize that I needed to create the job that I was looking for. And I still didn't know at that time what I wanted to do exactly.
You had some talk about in a second, that sort of criteria, right, for what you're actually looking for. I just want to touch upon that the point around the wedding, because it's so sorry to keep bringing it up. I think it's a very profound realization that in almost all cases we need some sort of crisis moment to create radical change. I remember Tony Robbins, right, this very like American guru type guy. Some of the stuff I disagree with, but something that always stuck with me is that point of, you have to, if you can't have a natural crisis like fainting your wedding, or for me it's getting fired and realizing I'm not made for employment. Without that, you have to try and engineer that kind of moment, because otherwise, in your case, it would have been really easy to carry on 20 years time, and then you might have looked back only then and started to have that, serious health problems, or realize, my kids are grown up and I wasn't there for their whole childhood, and I think many people do find themselves in that situation when it's sort of a bit too late, let's say. So yeah, I think it's difficult to do anything about, but I think if you're listening and you are maybe not happy with your work, you're seeing a real imbalance with impact on health, social, family, and then just trying to really create that moment of, this is enough, I need to make some change, I think is very important. Let's talk about, I want to come back to that point around criteria as well. I think you were clear about what you weren't looking for. What were the kind of thing, what was that process? Was it just writing it down, or just a general ongoing thought process of, well, I don't want to do full-time, so what if I could start a business that was, I could do part-time, for example? What was your thought process there? What kind of criteria did you fold into that decision?
Great question. I think you had several layers. What I did at that time, when I was still unsure what to do next, is I enrolled in like an online mentoring program that was, I think it was email teacher course, and it was about like understanding what you want to do, basically. And they had a lot of like prompt questions and little videos to help you get started, basically, with this thought process. And it came at a perfect moment in time, so I just enrolled, and I started like creating this document where I started just jotting down some things that I knew, because sometimes you just have to start with what you don't want, right? You just know not this, but it takes a while until you get to like, this is what I want to do instead, right? And so at least I started like figuring out what are all the things that I don't want to do anymore. And at the same time, I started to do some of these exercises where you imagine yourself sitting on a porch when you're like 80 years old, and you look back on your life, and you think about like what happened, what were some of the challenges that I might have faced, how did I overcome them, what are the stories that I want to tell when I'm old, right? And you zoom back, you zoom in closer and closer until you know, like, what do I need to do like 3 years from now, I don't know, a year from now, 6 months from now, 3 months from now, and so on, right? And so I started writing these things down. I still have that document, and I looked at it recently. It's so cool to see like how a lot of things have come true. Actually, so much so that I needed to create a new version for the next like 10, 15 years, because a lot of things I were able to put a check mark on. So that was one of the things that I did in a very structured way. At the same time, I had a lot of conversations with my husband about like, how do we want to create our family life? Because when something ends, like in this case, my employment, it gives you a chance to also rethink your situation with your partner. Like, about thinking about how much money do we need overall, and how do we want to get to that sum, like who brings in which amount of money, who works how much, and all of these things suddenly become discussion points. And for us, it was also about how much do we want to place our kids into external daycare, because we're expats, we're living in Switzerland. Our families are mostly 700 kilometers away. And so it's hard to find someone who just can take care of your kid for a couple of hours. So for us, it's mostly external daycare. At that point in time, my daughter was 2 years old roughly, and my son was just born basically. But this discussion we had before he was born, how much do we want to place our kids in daycare? And we decided for us, like 2 days per week is how much we want other people to take care of our kids at the maximum, because we also want to spend a lot of time with them, and for as long as they'll have us. And so that was an anchor point for us. Right. So we started to like move in closer on what my work life would look like, also from these external factors, like how much do we want to see our kids, and how much money do we want to make, and what is actually the decision currency for our life? Because are we maximizing for money? If we did, then probably I would have taken another route at that point in time. But we decided we were maximizing for joy. And that means you're taking different kinds of decisions, right? And it also means you have to think about how much time do I want to spend with my kids to still feel joyful, because for most people there's a tipping point. For me, I can't be around my kids all the time. I love them so much, but I need time to myself. So for me, it was like, okay, how much time do I want to spend with them to still be able to create joyful memories, and when do I need time to work on my own things? Where is this trade-off? And it's very different for everyone, right? But thinking about this and talking about this with your partner was super, super helpful for us. And it also helped me realize, especially together with this burnout situation, I realized that I was much more sensitive than I had ever given myself credit for. Like, I consider myself a highly sensitive person. And I learned that through having a highly sensitive kid, because suddenly I started reading all of this literature, and I figured, hey, I am the same. I'm just living a life that is not taking that into consideration. So I understood I needed much more time to myself. I needed to have more time doing sports, being in nature. Like, what are the elements that I want for my life? And the business is just one of those components for me, right? I don't know if that helps answer your question, but those are a couple of things that we were talking about.
No, I mean, super helpful. I love that we've had similar thing, moved to Portugal last year. We've got 1.5-year-olds, so sort of these big family decisions. And as you say, like, work is just a part of that. I like that you start with, I think a lot of people start on the financial side and then go, okay, well, if I did part-time, that means we've got X income, rather than saying, what are we actually optimizing for? And, in our case, me and my wife did basically a list of what are the 5 things that we really value individually, so that, we're fulfilled in, so for me, sport plus work plus social plus family life, we're fulfilled as individuals. We're going to just be a better unit and be better parents, because we're not going to be, not present when we're interacting with our son, or stressed about something, or feeling, frustrated because you're not able to follow your individual interest, or even things that we do as a couple, right? So I really like that, sort of go for the shared vision and then work backwards and see what would we need to do to make that happen.
And you just brought up a very important point. I think you said that successful, right? And I think a big part of my learning curve was also thinking about, what does it look like to be a successful parent, right? Does this mean that I am around all of the time? Does it mean that I calm my kid down instantly when it cries? Does it mean, for me, it means, for example, that my kids are able to take good decisions when I'm not around. That's one of the things that I'm optimizing for. But it took me a while to also understand, like, when am I happy with myself as a parent, and also when do I consider myself successful as an entrepreneur, because that also varies a lot. And you said that in the introduction, like, I've been involved in different kinds of entrepreneurial situations, from bootstrap to joint ventures to incubators. And it took me a while also to figure out, like, what kind of entrepreneur do I want to be? And that was also part of this process, I guess.
Yeah, it's so important because I think something like parenting, it's intangible, right? There's no scorecard of with entrepreneurship, right? We generally think of revenue. Some people will think of head, right? If I manage it, I'm hiring 100 people, like we're super successful. For me personally, profitability is a really key one, right? So you have that sort of security and stability. But yeah, with parenting, it's tougher because is it hours spent with the child? Is it how present are you? Seeing certain developments, sort of quite intangible, so it can be quite difficult. I want to talk about that decision to jump in and start a business, because I think there's a big difference. I'm sure many people have done some sort of vision setting, or even if it's having a glass of wine on a Friday after work with their partner and sort of chatting about how their lives could be better in some way. Some people have done variants of this, but then actually going and saying, I'm going to quit my job and do something, start a business from scratch is a whole different ball game. So you started Product Academy 2019. You had a 3-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old. I consider myself a fairly seasoned entrepreneur, but that sounds pretty crazy to me. So how did you jump into it? Was it just that vision that you set for yourselves as a family, or what were the key elements in making that decision to go, actually, I'm going to go start this business?
Well, I think one part was that I didn't see any other alternative that was very inspiring to me. That was one, and it wasn't a high opportunity cost, because there was not like this one job that I could have taken instead that really seemed fabulous to me. But it was also because I had already learned in my previous situations where I was involved in co-founding companies that I love the entrepreneurial track. I can manage risk. I love building things fast. It just plays to my strength, I think. And so I wasn't scared about about those parts. It's not like I've been in a corporate life for like the past 15 years, and now I was giving all of that up. I had been in other situations where I was working 80 hours per week in this incubator building a new company, or I moved to Madrid actually for my first startup and bootstrapped that with 4 Spaniards that I had just met, basically without speaking Spanish. So I had been in situations where I learned that I am quite resilient and that I can manage risk. So that was not so scary. And also, in full disclosure, it also makes a difference whether you're, for example, a single parent who has to provide for the family and has no other income to rely on. In my case, it was quite a soft start because I knew my husband had a normal, regular job and income. Of course, we were also relying on my income because we just had bought a house, and so the mortgage was there and all of that.
Living in Switzerland.
Yes, Switzerland, you need to make money. But it was not like I had to feed the entire family by myself. And that is something that gave me a lot of confidence, because we said in the beginning, okay, if I can cover the cost for the daycare, just to give you a ballpark, like two kids in daycare for 2 days per week, that's like 30K roughly in Switzerland. Depends on the facility, so it's a lot of money. And so we
Swiss
said,
francs,
I can,
euros,
yeah, Swiss francs, yeah,
okay,
Swiss francs, but it's basically the same these days.
Yeah.
So that was how much money I said I wanted to bring in, at least, right? So it turned out to be much more than that. But that is something that we were planning with, like for the mortgage and for everything. So that gave me an idea of how many sales I needed to close and how much money I needed to make that year, right? And I felt quite okay with that. And and until this day, I know that this is what I can fall back to, which gives me a lot of peace of mind.
I love that, because it's a similar, this is not my concept, but concept of a freedom number, right? Which is essentially, what is the number you need? If you start your business, what's the number you need to get to pay your basic bills?
Yeah.
If you don't have kids, like for most people, it's 3,000 to 4,000 euro. For some people, it's like 1,000 that I've worked with. Mm-hmm. It's much less than people think when they actually sit down and strip back. Okay, right. Well, I don't need to go to these fancy restaurants or fancy holidays, right? What is the minimum? And then it makes it, but it just makes it much more accessible, realistic, It's not that difficult to go, okay, well, 30K, well, great. That's going to be what, 3,000 a month? Yeah, that's doable. That means one high ticket customer maybe, or 10 people paying $300, €300, whatever. And I think it takes starting a business, this huge scary thing of, oh my God, I need to make millions with it, to just, okay, I need 5 sales a month. And if I can do that, then I'm great. I'm paying my bills, and I might be earning less initially, but I'm going to be way happier and fulfilled and excited about the work I'm doing.
A lot of things resonate with me. So I love the concept of, I think I first came across it in the book Company of One. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but I think the writer, if I'm not mistaken, the author talks about basically the amount of money that he needs or he wants to make. It's not just what he needs, but what he wants to make every year. And then once he reaches that number, he just stops working and goes surfing for the rest of the year. And that was so freaking inspiring. So I thought, like, this is so cool. Like, we should think about how much is enough. That's one of the guiding questions in my life. How much is enough? Because what I think, like, you can look at it from both sides. Like, of course, at the beginning, you have this pressure, like, I need to make money. But then there's also going to be situations in which you might have opportunities to make more money than you thought you needed. And then there's this trade-off, right? And I think it helps to also figure out, like, at which point in time do I say no to opportunities because I don't need the money, right? Because it's also easy to get sucked into this, like, okay, now maybe the business is going well, so I can do more and more and more. We have more in-house customers or whatever. And there's always a cost to that, right? But it becomes much more evident when you're a solopreneur because it has a price tag. I could have made 10K with this client or how much you're charging, right? And so I think it becomes harder to say no. And that's why for me it's so important to understand, like, what is the minimum I need to make, but also, like, how much is enough? I look at it from both sides.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, we work in similar industry, right? I think with product management training, the boom period, sort of 2020, 2022. So many conversations now. People are, oh, how are you going to scale it? Like, what, are you going to hire people? I'm like, nope. Oh, yeah. I'm fine, all good. Like, it might have been an error to miss out on really trying to high growth it, but I have actually zero regrets about not scaling Prod MBA.
Yeah.
It makes it more vulnerable to competition. You've got fewer resources, but for me, it was like, okay, I'm making up more than enough that I need. I'm not particularly financially driven. Like, as long as I can pay bills, put some savings away, then great. That's ticking the box for me, so that I can then go, do some travel or surf or whatever it is. And I've noticed now, particularly last year, I think, as the tech recession, you see many founders have just pushed themselves so hard for like 6-7 years, and they're not getting that return on investment from their business because the economics just aren't there. And they might have a big brand and name, but they haven't hit profitability, or they're maybe selling the business but not getting cashed out themselves. Right, their investors might take whatever money is there, they themselves walk away with almost nothing. And so I just think that this idea that you plan for this big payout at some point, or try and just maximize growth and money, I just haven't seen the evidence personally that it makes that much sense.
It depends what you're optimizing for. For me, freedom is one of the things that I'm optimizing for. So I have a couple of, like, principles or anchoring thoughts around my business, and one of them is that I want to be able to solve the company within 6 to 10 months if I'm getting bored or for some other reason I don't want to do it anymore. And that's something that might limit the way that I address certain opportunities, but it makes me so free inside. I would never trade that. So I think it depends what you're optimizing for. And yes, we have a certain tendency to celebrate the hustle culture and only look up to founders who are scaling revenue. But I have much more respect for every small business owner who is profitable and who's running, like, a bakery or, I don't know, a hairdresser salon, because that is like heartmanship, and that is a lot of work to make that happen. And for me, like, I take a lot of pride in being profitable from day one. Yeah, I will probably not make millions with it, but I have been profitable from day one. And it was a deliberate decision, just like with you, to not hire anyone. So I decided to scale the company. I found ways to scale the company but they don't rely on hiring people. And that is what paid off a lot, like during crisis moments like COVID. I was always so lean. I don't even have an office. So I don't have a lot of costs involved in running the business. I run it in my Snoopy pants most of the day. I love it.
Let's talk about that topic, because that decision of going solopreneur, before we had this conversation, you said you have been a co-founder of 2 startups, and it sounds like you've been involved in many more. So just to be really clear, why did you choose solopreneurship? Particularly, okay, you've got very young kids at this time, and it looks even more intimidating. Like, sure, you've got entrepreneurial experience, great, but it looks even more intimidating from the outside to go, I'm going to go it alone. So why was that? Was that purely because of the flexibility, the freedom, any other sort of factors involved there?
I'm going to say something on record that is really hard to say for me, but I think I'm just not the best team player. Like, I really love working by myself. That is how I am fastest, how I deliver the highest quality, and how I stay most true to myself. And some people would probably now tell me that I am a good team player because I work with a lot of people in the Product Academy who were like 60 people working together in different capacities and roles. But I am very, very selective when it comes to who I work with and how much I want to see people. I love being by myself. It's just like who I am. I also don't go to a lot of like weddings or birthday parties because I don't like to be around people a lot. And it might sound weird because most people who know me through the academy, they know me from teaching workshops and running events and so on, right? And that is, I love that. But after that, I have to go back and be by myself for a long time, right? So that is a part of me that I didn't show so much in the past, that I compromised a lot in the past, and which might also have led to the burnout. So I think it's just in my nature that I love being by myself, and I also don't like to compromise quality, for example. And that is what I think it's also really hard to find good people to work with, right? And I found a lot of them like that I now work with, and they are my trainers or mentors or coaches in the academy. But it's not so easy to find people that you really enjoy working with, both on a personal level and also where you feel like you have the same affinity to risk or the same definition of what quality looks like. And I just feel at this stage that is the best I can do to leverage my potential, but also to stay true to my current situation. Yeah.
I'm nodding along because I'm very similar. I'd call myself an introverted extrovert, i.e. I'll do the workshops and be high energy.
Yes.
Like, for a podcast, but I will need to go and decompress afterwards.
Yeah.
And
I call it a small group extrovert. Sorry.
Small group, yeah, it's a good way of explaining it. For introverts thinking of starting their own business, I think you probably find that you're really effective because very few people can just sit in silence for 10 hours and just focus on something and get it done. I'm the same. I love it. I love, this morning I was working on this new startup idea, just doing the sort of no-code database setup, all of this stuff. Love it. I find it really energizing. But as I'm sure you've worked with some extroverts, they need the coffee break, they need the chat, they struggle to sit down and focus on something in depth for more than 5 minutes. And I think it's very difficult to be a solopreneur without that ability to go deep on whether it's just getting the work done or doing that sort of strategic thinking by yourself, because you're not always going to have the mentors or the people to chat with in a co-working to help you develop ideas, right? You have to sort of form and drive your own ideas to a large extent. Obviously, external influence is always important, but generally it's you, and you have to get stuff done and work out what to do every day and be quite effective at that. Solopreneurship, very controversial topics. It's a real, some people hate it, some people absolutely love it. How do you define, Product Academy has been going for 5 or 6 years now. Like, how do you define success in very concrete terms for that as a business?
That's a really good question. So, of course, I have certain revenue goals that I set for myself, roughly like a ballpark where I feel like, okay, a minimum we already defined, like, okay, 30K, this is how much money we want to make. But for me, it's more, I think it's about how much how easy is it for me to fill the courses, for example, that I'm launching? How easy is it for me to fill these courses without having to be really loud about it? So that's not a very specific and tangible goal for you, but for me, it feels like I can see the progress that I've made because it's getting easier and easier to fill all of these courses without hunting down participants. Because I've been relying on word of mouth from day one, which means that this business is growing slower, but it has some built-in feedback loops that are now coming alive more and more, because the people that we started working with 5 years ago, they are now in leadership positions. They're coming back, asking for training for their own employees and so on. So there is a built-in network effect that is now kicking in, and I had to be patient, but I can now see that it's working, and that is something that I see as success, because I hate cold calls and all of that marketing stuff. It's really not my thing. I haven't spent $1 for like ads or anything ever. Like the only marketing that I do is like being a bit vocal on LinkedIn here and there, but compared to others, I'm like super silent, and I don't have like a schedule on how often I post and so on. It's like I just post when I feel it. But that is basically my main marketing channel, plus the events that we run. But mostly we rely on happy alumni who are bringing back other people. And this is great because it's giving us a self-selection process. And I think what we often feel is like you have to get a lot of attention from the outside world for your business to be successful. But if I have to fill 12 spots for a mentoring program, if I get 12 applications and those are the right people, then I'm successful, right? It's not like, of course, we also get more, and sometimes we have to turn people down. But for me, the goal is not to get a lot of applications to then turn down 80% of the applicants. For me, the job is to have the right 12 people in class so they can build a great network and move on and have this course together, right? So it's also, I think it's also about the ego can get in the way a lot when we talk about success.
100%.
And so for me, I think in the last 10 years, I've deflated my ego quite a bit, because it's still loud and it's still vocal, and I wish it wasn't there, but I think it's getting better in that sense that for me, success does not depend so much anymore from like having direct reports. I wanted to have a leadership position in the past just to have direct reports. I didn't even care in which industry, right? I just wanted to be a leader. And so now, like, the opposite is true. I don't want to have employees depending on me. I just don't want to, because I don't need it so much for my ego. I need other things. My ego is still out. But I feel like if we can figure out whether we're doing the things we're doing for the right reasons, or whether it's just to like please our egos, I think that is a big step. Not sure if I'm answering your question, because it's not like I can give you like these are the 5 numbers that I need to reach.
No, I think it's spot on. It's
yeah.
I mean, it's something I've struggled with over the years, because I find, for example, I would say, okay, product me, I'd take 20 students per cohort, do it 4 times a year. And if it was like, it would be like a month before and I hadn't filled out the places, I'd be like beating myself up over, oh my God, I haven't got 20 sales. I need to go and, be everywhere and try and do podcasts and LinkedIn code. And then I sort of realized I've just set a random arbitrary number. Like, if it's like 8 people, then it's different, because it sort of affects the dynamic of how this boot camp is set up, right? Specifically, what I mean. Yeah. But it's basically an arbitrary number when I go to 20. And then, I found all this inner narrative of going, basically, I'm a failure, I'm not doing good enough. And it's just a random number. And then I found, I think like yourself, rather than going from, because initially it is good to have financial figures, I believe, because of the fact that it does create a certain level of security and signal that, this is the business to pursue. But I think once you start hitting that, then going like, you want to double it or increase 30% every year, it's just like, well, like yourself, sort of coming back to, okay, what are the principles? Well, by having fewer people, that means less money, but it means I've got more free time, so I can go and surf more, or spend time with the family more.
That's a really good point, because for me, I think what happened over the years is like, since I set these constraints from the beginning that I want to only work 2 days a week, what happened in the past 5 years is I kept my revenue, and like the revenue grew, but my profit basically, I wanted to make a 6-figure profit. That's when I'm really, really happy. And that's happening at the moment. But the thing is, like, what I take pride in is like, if you calculate the hourly wage, then that's pretty good. Because I'm working, I mean, I used to work 16 hours per week. That's kind of 2 days per week on average, right? The thing is, what I'm doing is I'm taking 3 months of vacation per year because I'm taking all the school holidays off for my kids. And also now in the last 2 years, I started working out way more. So I'm doing like 10, 11 hours of sports every week. And that's also, I took that away from my work time. So now I'm not taking any calls before 10 because I want to go for my runs and so on. So I'm now working even less. I think on average, I'm working maybe 12 hours per week. Of course, there are some weeks where I travel for work because I go on to a conference or whatever, and I work on the plane. But usually I work even less. So my success is not that I have increased the revenue so much, but I'm working even less and kind of keeping the profit stable.
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it, actually, hourly rate. Just, again, otherwise you set this arbitrary number that you're like, oh my God, I haven't hit it. Or it's like recession came in last year. It's like revenue dropped for me. I know for many businesses, and like, that's fine. It's part of an economic cycle. There's not much you can do about that. I think you're right. It's saying like, what is the hourly rate and how, and then giving yourself at least some arbitrary way to sort of see, okay, am I improving that or not? How do you find, I've always found it very difficult. So let's say first 2 years of product made lots of work, right, really building it. And then if, okay, now it's stable. And then I was reducing down to sort of 4 or 5 hours work day, pre-kids as well, right? So I didn't have a good amount of free time. But there was always this voice in my head saying, oh, I'm going to go surfing on Tuesday afternoon, but I should be working because it's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. And it definitely took me, I mean, I still have that, but it took me a year or two to just be like, I create my own rules now, and that's fine. And productivity is however it's personal to you. And again, the goals and how effective you're being, not how many hours you're putting in. How have you navigated that internal discussion? Because it's that sort of societal pressure plus anyone that's ambitious, there's pressure we put on ourselves as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me pose another question to you. What does work mean to you? Like, what is work? How do you define it? Where does it start? Where does it end?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I mean, a good example of this was I tried to differentiate the type of work I'm doing. So say last week I'm launching 12 startups in 12 months, basically one every 4 weeks. Week 1 is discovery. Specifically, that means looking for ideas and assessing, 2 or 3 that I go, there's something here I want to pursue. Try and get some discovery calls done as well. Conclusion of week 1 for me is then selecting a specific idea and having a rough outline of what that would look like as a solution. So week 2, I can start thinking about feasibility. Good example last week, I was like, okay, a couple of hours of focus work doing breaking down the problem, lean canvas, unique value proposition, blue ocean strategy, right? Sort of stress testing the idea. Did that, I felt like, I'm really not sure about these 3. I did that for 3 ideas, 2 hours focus work. Then I was like, I'm going to go surfing because I want to sort of just think about this in the background. Whilst I'm surfing, come up with idea number 4, and then scrap all the work I did in the morning, come back, 15 minutes, map out a whole new business idea that I'm really excited about and now working on. So yeah, I over the years, I've been quite good at baking in things like a walk, walking the dog, but also walking and thinking about an issue, going for a run, baking exercises in, taking a full hour off for lunch, these kind of things. I would still consider part of the work day, rather than just always being, on the screen, for example. So I think I've just, from having worked a lot for myself over 12 years or so, been quite good at separating, like, okay, where's the impact? Not, I'm checking my emails or scrolling LinkedIn because it feels like I'm doing something productive.
Yeah, and I think that is also what happened for me, is when I had the switch from managing my time to managing my energy. Because I feel like it depends on how you define work. Is it work when I'm going for a run like I did this morning and I'm listening to some work related podcast? Is that work or is that fun, right? Or if I'm cooking and I have an idea and I'm suddenly starting to think about like, oh, this course could like be different in the future and I want to change something, like is that work or not? Like this is time that I cannot really clock, right? But for me, it's more about managing my energy. And I don't owe anyone an explanation of how many hours I actually work. But what I can say for sure is how much time I spend at my desk. And that is time that I want to limit because I know that that is not the most creative state that I'm in usually. I mean, that's work that needs to get done. But like the playful part of work where I'm having new ideas or I'm solving a problem, that also happens anywhere. It's like something that I cannot really plan. So I think it's really important to start thinking about what does work even look like. And that's why it makes me actually crazy when people have to clock their hours, like my husband. It makes me crazy because it forces you to sit there and like clock those hours, and maybe you would have been so much more productive if you could do something else in that time.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, I think one of the things I love about solopreneurship and entrepreneurship generally is there's no hiding. It's just you don't go do something, no one's going to do it. If you don't, there's also maximum transparency. I think even with a small team in a startup, it's like you have to do your job, otherwise we are not going to get results, and people can see very quickly what you're doing or not. So it takes away that incentive of busy work, of just looking busy and trying to make excuses for things, because it's it just doesn't work. And I've noticed.
However, I have to sorry.
Correct.
No, I think what you said before is what can be really hard is because I also still have this whole glorification of being efficient, right? Because I am now I'm cramming all of my work into like 10 to 12 hours. So I'm kind of maxed out on efficiency. So the thing that's really hard for me is to do nothing. That's the hardest thing that you can ever ask me to do nothing. Because I would always like to go for a run or like do something or bake something or create something. But if you ask me to sit still, and I know I need more of that, that's something I'm forcing myself to do more often. The hardest thing. And that will feel like a complete waste. But that's also like the flip side. I think for people like us, we're so driven and we always want to get things done that we sometimes don't see that doing nothing can be the most productive thing that you can do. And for me as a runner, I'm currently at the edge of training too much because I love it so much that I have a hard time taking a break from it. But I know that I'm noticing that my body needs it and I still feel bad for not running. So I think that's something that I need to learn. For others, it might sound completely crazy because they love sitting on the couch and doing nothing, but that's a skill that I completely lack and I need to acquire one of those days because otherwise it's not going to be sustainable.
I want to tie this. That point is something I also struggle with being a parent is, for example, if I've done a work day, I'm super present. I'm actually very good now. I just switch off because I know I've done the thing I needed to do. But I would find it difficult, say this morning, right? Fred wakes up at 6:30. I start work early because I like finishing early. So I'm sort of just starting to get into the flow. He wakes up and I go and do playing with him and parenting duty, etc., which I love. But also there's a part of my brain going, you should really be working now because it's that window in the morning when I'm most productive. How do you sort of, let's say, balance these two things on a day-to-day basis?
So my work schedule looks like this. Mondays are my full days because I need one day per week that is potentially available for workshop. Okay, so that is the day that kids are in school now or kindergarten or daycare until 4, and they start around 8. Okay, so that's Saturday. But I will not start working before 10, as I said before, unless I have a workshop. But Mondays are my workshop days, and that's something that my clients have to deal with. I usually offer workshops only on Monday, and sometimes I do 2-day workshops Monday, Tuesday. But I will not offer them on another day because it's just like how my schedule works. And then I have Tuesday morning and Thursday morning until 1:30 p.m. roughly. That's when the kids come back from school, and those are my work days. Then I also have Wednesday and Friday off in the morning, because now, but we didn't start like this in the beginning, but now they're both in kindergarten and school, so they're off in the mornings, they're off to school. And I have those 3 days, but for example, on Wednesday, I go for a 20 to 30K run, so I'm not at the office, right? So that's something that I decided to give to myself as a gift to myself. I have this free morning, but I'm spending it with myself, and I'm not working on those days. What can happen, however, is, and that's how I structure my week, is I have these planned work time containers when I know the kids are at school, right? This is time that I can definitely count on unless they're sick. And then I have what I grant myself is like an hour or two per week. That's kind of WhatsApp time for me, because I run a lot of my business through WhatsApp. I'm in touch with all of the trainers. I'm in touch with the students. So I will remind someone to send in their homework. I will tell a trainer to like maybe start looking at their prep work, because their session is due in 2 months and we need to send out some homework to the students. So I will send out some messages or unblock other people, because what I hate is for others to be blocked because of me, just because I decided to work less, right? So I have these roughly 1 to 2 hours per week where I will work from anywhere, like from the playground. I will send a quick message, or maybe on a weekend, or maybe on an evening I respond to a voice message or whatever, because that is kind of the async work where other people need my input or need something from me, a nudge or whatever, and that is work that will happen on top of the work that I sit at my actual desk.
Interesting. Yeah, I've started to use voice notes as well, for just feels less not scary, less sort of stressful than an email. And I think, as you said, it's like, you don't feel like you're really working. I think obviously unless you're constant, like hundreds of messages a day, then it's not sort of dragging you out of the present so much. I love that you structure you basically, you have specific blocks on specific days, and it's like I'm doing this, that. So which I think is great, because I find I generally have some structure to my week. I think it's very easy to go like, I'll open up my calendar for Monday to Friday, because what if you miss a client call, or if this client can't do a specific day. I like that you're quite non-negotiable with that, and it's like, if you can't do Monday, you can't do Monday, and I think that's such a very healthy way to do it. I've started to do it more, and just sort of blocking things, batching specific tasks together is a really nice way to do it. Any other sort of tips and tactics related to planning your week around this sort of balance of parenting and running your own business?
I like planning. It's something that I have always done. Like since when I was a kid, I had like these plans about like what I would do for a summer, or what I would do on a specific day, and I like crossing off the things that I have done. But I think you cannot plan everything. We know that. We in product know that. And so what I try to do is I prepare everything that I can prepare, because it's in my control. I prepare everything way in advance. So this morning, I prepared a workshop that is due end of October. I prepped the slides for it, because I know that is something I can do and I don't need anyone else for it. But and the goal here is for me to be 2 weeks ahead of time. That's my comfy level of where I want to be. I want to be ready for a workshop that takes place in 2 weeks. I want to be ready today. It's not always possible, because I sometimes depend on people sending in their homework, or somebody like, I don't know, telling me what their actual goals are for the meeting, or something shifts. But whatever I can control, I will try to control it and prepare for it. And that's why I'm always like navigating way into the future and prepping all of these things. And that's one of the things that I do, because then I have more space for the last minute stuff, because kids can get sick. We know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I have to say, I have been sick only once in 5 years. I've missed 1 day of workshops. I'm just happy that my health was pretty good. But with the kids, it can always happen, right? And I need to be ready to cover for that in some way. And the best way I can do that is be prepared ahead of time, so I'm not relying on today for tomorrow's workshop. And the other thing is, I have buffer days. I do have certain days in my calendar that are just like buffered out for nobody can take or book any meetings with me on that day, because I know I will need them eventually, because something will happen that messes with my plan, and then I need to catch up. And it's really hard to catch up, because if I lose a full day, like let's say my kids get sick on a Monday, I lose 50% of my work time for that week, just with that one day. And so I need some way to catch up on the work that I wasn't able to do. And in order to not have to work weekends or evenings, that's my last resort. But I have these days in my schedule that are just empty, and they give me peace of mind because I know like I can just get some stuff done then.
I love it. So just sort of visualizing how you think about this, and I think I do it to a much worse extent, but you're very clear on your principles of like, here's what I want to get out of my life. Again, not just work, like all of these different key elements like health. The fact that you've been only 6 months in 5 years with young kids shows that you've obviously, your health has come a long way from fainting. Okay, what are the principles, and then how do those then guide planning specifically, like my week and then the day to day, and I suppose even monthly, right? In terms of having these buffer days, and it's a really nice way to think of it. I think perhaps that is the key lesson, in fact, for someone listening is, okay, you might have young kids or you're planning to, and you go, oh, God, it's really scary because how the hell do you fit time in? I think it's ultimately comes, like everything, success comes down to systems, and having systems that are also work in the real world and are adapted to things going wrong, and having these kind of buffers that you're not sort of really thrown off.
In general, I try not to be reactive, but to be proactive about most things in my life. And so for that, another thing that I do, for example, I go on an offsite with myself. Like just because I don't have a team doesn't mean I cannot go on a strategy offsite. So I go to the mountains once a year at least by myself for 2 days. And I think about like, where do I stand? What do I want more of in my life? What do I want less of? Like, and how would I like the next year to be roughly? Do I want to do more in-house? Do I want to do like more courses in the mountains? Whatever, right? And so I try to strategize, because that is sometimes hard to do in a given time box of 4 hours, right? So sometimes I just don't feel it on a Thursday morning to strategize for the next year, right? And so going away from the desk, like the mountains are my happy place. So this is where I can think best. And so I think as a solopreneur, sometimes we limit ourselves because we think we cannot do all of the things that a regular corporate would do. But I think we can go on an offsite with ourselves. We can have a board of directors. I have a board of awesome product people that I just handpicked because I decided I want these people's input, and I asked them, like, would you like to be on my board of awesome product people? And like most of them said yes. And I will consult them on some things where I feel like I'm lonely and I don't think I can make the best decision by myself. So I just ask those people. It's less formalized than in a regular startup or in a regular company. But I feel like sometimes we also have to just go grab these elements that play an important role in a structured corporate life and adapt them to our needs.
Yeah, I love that idea. The having that board of sort of formalized but not formal support system in a way. And personal offsite is something I keep meaning to do. Like, as you saying, it's a sort of silly sounding idea, but it makes a huge amount of sense. You go off and have quite a structured, just ability to zoom out in some way. Yeah. I think it's really effective. And, I get that a bit with stuff like surf, because it's, it's quite like a spiritual silent thing if you go for sunrise and there's no one around. Yeah. But it's a difference of doing an hour and a half versus 2 days, the depth of thinking. I want to come back to, I love this concept of, again, something I struggle with, but I do this sort of planning for serendipity. So that it's the listening to a podcast and that sparking an idea, or carving out time to, it might be networking or reading, or just trying to sort of question thinking and go in different directions. Do you structure that? Say, for example, you're going to do a 20K run. Do you go, great, I really want to listen to these 2 podcasts on that? Or is it just grab, open up and see what's grab your interest?
So if you were to look at my past podcast that I listened to this year, you would see a great variety of topics. And I usually go through certain phases where I like binge listen to a certain type of podcast. I binge listen to Huberman's podcast and listen to all of this sciencey stuff. And then there was a phase where I listened to a lot of parenting stuff and neurodivergent kids. And then I listened to a lot of like even spiritual things about pagan rituals. Like there could be like really like you wouldn't believe what kind of stuff I'm listening to. And just this morning, I didn't have a plan for what I wanted to listen to. I just opened my Spotify, but I knew I wanted to listen to something around systems thinking, and I typed that in. But I ended up in a CFO podcast. I didn't even know that existed, and they were talking, about the Enneagram and other things about learning in general. It was super insightful, but I have a very strong intuition and I trust it more and more. So usually books find me and podcasts find me at the right moment in time, and I have stopped questioning it. So whenever I feel like, okay, I should listen to the CFO podcast, I will just do it, because usually I know that there's something good in it. And if not, I can always skip it
I agree with that. I think once you listen to
Yeah.
enough, hundreds of hours or thousands, you start to sort of picture in. I love that. I try to do a similar thing nowadays of go, there's a topic I'm thinking about. If it's, if I know, I don't know if it's Tim Ferriss or Huberman, like if it's health, right? You sort of know, okay, I'll probably start there and see if they've got an episode, but if not, just see what pops up and grabs interest. And you start to sort of, just discover things that you may not have been thinking about before.
And you know what? I think this is exactly what we need also in product. If I may just go off on a tangent here, but I think I'm quite bored. Although I live in, I work in product, and I love product in general, but I'm quite bored by listening to the same people all of the time. And I feel like we also we're losing. We're not so humble anymore in product. Like, we think we've got all of the answers, and there's so much more that needs to be connected. And so what is happening for me also at Product Academies, I'm drifting off more and more towards the topic of learning organizations, which has always been the why and the bigger vision of Product Academy. But I feel like in order to understand how to best move an entire organization forward, we need to also take much more into consideration than just product related content, right? It's about learning, it's about the ego, it's about so many other things. And I think until we really understand how to connect all of these dots and think more holistically, we're gonna be so boxed in and limited in what we can achieve. So I feel like, that's just something that
I was going to say you went on a tangent, but it's tangential thinking is the thing, right? That is, I think you're spot on. It's just actually thinking differently, because this is sort of, it's like homogenization of product, where it's like everyone knows, not everyone, but, it's a thing now, like product vision and product strategy and discover, like we get it, right? There's enough people putting content about this stuff, and it's valuable, but it's also, there's a danger that it's going to do what sort of agile Scrum did to product maybe 5-10 years ago, which is be like, here's the plug and play playbook, just do exactly this thing and everything's great and it's all going to work out. And I think I come at a different angle with product MBA, where it's more about just go build stuff, learn through doing, see the principles in action, and then you're going to get these deep insights. Whereas I think you're looking at it from you need to get organizational level right, so that when you apply this stuff, it actually delivers real impact. I think it's a really, really, really good point. I think it's a really good place to wrap up, Tanya. I just want to do one final quick fire question for you. What one piece of advice would you give a parent wanting to start a business? Could be a parent of a young child or expecting parent as well.
Good question. Well, a part of what we already covered, which is to understand what successful parenting looks like for you, and successful business building looks like for you. I think what helped me a lot, and that doesn't just go for parents in general, and what helped me the most is to be really clear about my hypotheses. And so I really have a hypothesis backlog, where I basically write down what are the big assumptions that I have about, can be both about the business that I'm trying to build, but also maybe I have the assumption that my kids would be unhappy if they were in daycare more often. Or it could be a lot of different assumptions that we build our current strategy on. And I think being very, very specific and vocal about what are these underlying assumptions that I'm operating on, and how do I know them to be true, and what would be signals that tell me that I need to pivot on some of them. I think that is something that helped me in life a lot. It's a quite scientific approach, but I think it's something that we don't do enough, both in business and in our personal lives. And that's how we take a lot of our decisions also as parents. Like, for example, when it's about watching TV, like how much TV can our kids watch? We have experimented with like vouchers, with like giving them unlimited access, with like a lot of different things that we usually talk about beforehand. Like, how do we know that this is a success? What do we expect to see? What will happen? Maybe there's going to be I don't know, like a shift in one direction, but then it will bounce back to another kind of behavior. But being very deliberate about your decisions and kind of building everything around the major decisions that you have to take. I think that's my general advice for all organizations and for all systems. The more decision-centric we are, I think the more momentum we can generate, and the more conscious we are about our actions.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that summarizes really well what we talked about actually in these systems that you've developed, which, I've got a load of personal notes of sort of things I want to test out after today's conversation. That was honestly, fascinating. And I think really actionable. I think it's a great, any parent listening to this, entrepreneur generally, I think some really, really valuable, meaty like substance to what you shared with us today. Tanya, I know you post on LinkedIn. Do you want to share any links, specific calls to action before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can read more about Product Academy on productacademy.ch and find us on LinkedIn as well. And if you're curious about my personal story or other podcasts that I've given, and also my very, very personal blog where I write about all of my struggles, then you can find that one on tanjalau.com/blog. We'll find the blog, but also for the podcast there, and this one will also go up there as soon as I have it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Tanya. And looking forward to re-listening to this when we go live.
Yeah, same. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Refounders. If you enjoyed this episode and want to get each shiny new episode straight to whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast, please subscribe using the subscribe button below. If you're feeling generous, why not share with a friend?